Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and a new Elden Ring Things You Didn't Know episode. Today we've got quite the lore discussion, which is often one of my favorite things to talk about, especially when I don't really make lore videos myself anymore, but maybe again in the DLC. But with that said, let's get to it. There's a lot to talk about. We begin today's episode then here, Ranni's Rise, with herself. Now, it's no secret that Ranni is quite a unique and interesting character, especially when we consider the fact that she has two faces. You can quite literally see them there. Now, if I position myself perfectly behind her, we can get a nice zoom in and take a look at that. As you can see, one side of her face is closed, that eye with the magical imprint, and that's where the ghostly form begins. But it was brought to my attention that the original plan for Ranni, at least in testing, was different to the one we see in game today. Firstly, from our main man Sekiro Dubi, who back in September discovered that there was actually originally a double voice for Ranni planned. Just like the double faces, she actually had two voices play when she would speak. This was found talking to Ranni in the closed network test version of the game, so well before release.
I am the witch Renna. I'd heard tell of a tarnished hurtling about atop a spectral steed, and upon looking into the matter, the talk I surmise is of thee.
As you can hear from Sekiro Dubi's tool then, the plan was to use two copies of the same voice actor, basically talking at once. Without much thought really required on this one, it's probably the case that they were thinking both faces would speak. Perhaps the spectral one would have a unique sort of ghostly effect to it. Now obviously they walked this back to just have one speaking, which is a lot clearer and easier to understand, but it is kind of a shame in a way because it's quite unique. And actually in the original story cinematic trailer, Ranni is in that. The start and then at the end where you actually see her speaking. And hey, her spectral face and mouth is also speaking at the exact same time. Maybe when this cinematic was in creation, which will have taken a very long time, they still thought maybe both voices would happen, but maybe not. And you know, this unique aspect of Ranni and the two faces, it's not really talked about or discovered in any way in game that I'm aware of. However, it is a very interesting detail because it was darkblue_ink on Twitter that talked about a detail I'd never known. Supposedly, there was actually going to be two physical faces at one point. Much like how she has two arms and then another two pair of arms, she was going to have two faces. Very old concept art showed this, where two faces were coming out of the one body. And a very early, clearly unfinished image of when Ranni's sacrifice versus the fingers occurs, it looks like there were two physical faces in the doll's body in that image, as drawn by Dark Blue here to emphasize that. Maybe during the conceptual phase of this character, it was going to be a puppet that was quite different to a normal human. Instead though is what we have here today. One doll with an extra set of arms and a spectral face. Let me know what you guys think about this, and a huge shout out to Dark Blue for highlighting this and getting me thinking about it. Moving on though, we have the follow-up from the big question, the big discussion from last episode, to do with the statue here in the arena of Malekith the Black Blade and Farum Azula. Now, the big question then was about this character and the wolves. This statue takes place right under a really important sigil that is the Elden Ring, but a more ancient and primordial version. Perhaps what it once was before the Golden Order came and sort of ordered things more directly, changed the way things worked. As we know, the Elden Lord, as it were, was Placidusax long before it was Marika. And that's where this statue comes in and a lot of the speculation as to who this character actually is. Now we start with one of the most popular theories in the comments of last time. From Zero G's, they suggested that many people think the three wolves and this character is Miquella and his wolves. It seems to be speculated that the character in the Shadow of Erdtree is Miquella and they're riding Torrent. We are given the spirit calling bell by Ranni, who references Torrent when she speaks to us and brings us this bell because we are riding Torrent. She also, of course, gives us the lone wolf ashes, which are very important to this whole topic, associated with the rider of Torrent, and the rider of Torrent might be Miquella. Now Miquella is well known for the braided hair and works it into certain items. For example, the followers of Miquella at the Erdtree, they have a braided chain around them, much like that braided hair of Miquella. The thing is, Miquella is not the only one to braid his hair ever, and we have seen some screenshots say of Marika with braided hair. He could have learned it from her, as that is his mother. Further, we again have the lone wolf ashes lore, spirit of wolves chased from their pack. Now Hank Scorpio suggested that the wolves being chased off from their pack also kind of ties into Miquella. Hank ties this to the fact that, as he's known as sort of a messiah figure to rejected and disenfranchised masses, whatever race and faction they belong to, well, wolves chased from their pack, they do fit into that, don't they? So that's one theory, and one that I really like. So what do you guys think about that? But then there's a second main aspect to this. Ghetto Planet, which I hope I pronounced correctly, suggests this is actually just an Empyrean. Rather than one specific character, it is a representation of an Empyrean. The next person to inherit inherit the Elden Ring, to become, say, the god of the lands. So these two images next to each other, with that context in mind, well, that's quite relevant and valid. Empyreans are the ones that are capable of that, and the shadows that protect them are often wolves. Take Ranni with Blythe, are an obvious one. Marika and Malekith. Ranni herself actually has a literal pack of 3 wolves hanging out in front of her tower. And much like that statue we were looking at, 2 of them are just kind of chilling and sitting there, with one of them just wandering around. Though I don't think the statue references Ranni in any way, it is really important symbology. Finally, there's a theory about this character being, well, literally Marika. As the old order with Placidusax faded, and the new order with Marika took form. But why would they create a statue to basically another faction that's taking over and they don't want to? Placidusax still exists and hopes for a new opportunity, a new order where he returns to Elden Lord status. So I'm not entirely convinced of that, but it is a popular theory because apparently, as some people mentioned, Fatty talked about this in one of his videos. Although I doubt he would state anything as fact, and neither would I. They're all very interesting theories though, and I'm really glad that we could talk about this, especially in this series. So let me know what you think on those 3 main points: Miquella, the Empyreans, and Marika. Moving on from some lore discussion, let's now talk about a cool gameplay mechanic that you can use in your own gameplay. This is something I've done in the series quite a few times now, actually. There's many tricks and cool things you can do, such as jumping and then holding the sprint button, and then from standstill you're already sprinting. This can be great for when, say, traversing land and trying to make a ledge jump from standstill. So much like that, here's a trick that you can do to traverse the land a little bit more efficiently. So a great example of this is when you're going uphill. When you're spam jumping, because maybe you've got to jump over a bunch of ledges, you have momentum, you have inertia, and what occurs is basically a slowdown, and as you spam jump, you basically stop moving at any real pace. So as you can see, I'm sprinting, I'm jumping, and we're really slowing down. In this case with stairs, there's nothing stopping me from just sprinting up, but of course there's many examples, which I'll show in a second, where you do have to make a few jumps back to back. The thing is, there's a very simple trick you can use, which is just blocking. So when you're block sprinting, for some reason, they just don't give you inertia when you're just existing normally. So as comparison, as I just jump and jump and jump, I'm currently holding block while I'm spamming sprint and jump, and I am not slowed down at all. This is a nice just detail whenever you're dealing with that inertia, but let me give you a really relevant example, because something I do in my build videos constantly is going to New Game Plus and test, say, builds and their DPS potential. One of the ones I end up at a lot is Godric, so I end up running through the center of Stormvale Castle off camera because, you know, it's an efficient way to just run through the middle and bypass all the enemies, and I come to this point all the time. So in ignoring that inertia by using sprint jumping while blocking, I basically barely slow down, and I'm able to absolutely blast through that area. And as I said, there are many other examples of kind of like little lips like this, especially in the open world, where you're jumping up. And when you're just default jumping without sprinting, you really kind of slow down and lose your momentum each time you repeatedly jump. So it's a minor thing, but it's a very useful thing and something I use all the time, so it definitely deserves to be talked about in this series. On that note, if you have any gameplay tips of that nature to suggest in the comments, then please let me know and we might include it in the series. Finally, we end today's episode in the boss room of Astel, because it's quite an important progression of a species of character that we see in the game, and it's something I've never really talked about in this series, but have known from very early on in this game's life cycle. Astel is kind of the final form of a creature we see all over the Lands Between, and this is perfectly captured in one of the newest looks at a faction from Zlofsky. As always, Zlofsky is an incredible creator on Twitter who regularly takes a detailed look at some of the player models and character models that we see in game, but mid-fight you're not really able to look at the details. So as always, I really recommend their Twitter account, give them a follow, they create great things, and I intentionally only show some of it. For example, part of the 4 image set with this faction, the Eternal City, we're just looking at these guys. These are the creatures from the cosmos. If we look at the lore of the Wing of Astel itself, we can get a tiny bit of lore about Astel, crafted from a relic of the natural born of the void, or the cosmos, who is said to have assailed the Eternal City. That's a big topic and one we recently referenced. There's Nokron, the Eternal City, and there's Nokstella, the Eternal City. It's interesting because the whole idea is that they were plunged into darkness, never to see the stars again, but that would suggest they were always underground, and they still have this starry image. Perhaps they weren't always underground, but one theory is that the Lake of Rot is actually what Astel created, destroying what was once a major city here, and no longer having the starry sky, it it's just this rotten horror instead. But anyway, the Astel is actually an evolution that we see throughout the game, as mentioned, and shown in this image is the 4 versions. Astel being the final evolution, but those really annoying hanging ones that you actually find in those underground regions. They'll blast you from range by throwing loads and loads of rocks at you, but they're not quite so magical as Astel in the final fight. You'll also note that their colour is very, well, colourless, very grey, without all the blue and purple and even orange of Astel. Then we have these other creatures. For example, you'll fight one here in this crater above the volcano manor. This one is a more evolved version of one that you can fight around the world that's just weaker. And that's again represented in this image by Zlowski. You can see there's actually a difference between the two physically, because this advanced one you fight near Volcano Manor has more access to, say, different gravity abilities. So this Falling Star Beast is a more advanced version of another. So there is that form of evolution that you encounter as you play, and so it's thought that Astel is the final version, that the Falling Star Beast is sort of the low-level baby version that came from the sky like a comet. The full grown is the advancement. Then you have those Astels that are colorless that hang from the ceiling, and finally Astel as the final evolution. I'm not sure what it is that actually causes them to evolve, like butterflies and caterpillars, but it's a really cool detail that you could entirely miss if you never really stopped to pay attention. Images like this are a perfect example of those types of reveals, and as I've never really talked about this one in the series, it's about time. But there you have it, another episode down, and again, a lot of lore talked about today. Let me know what you thought about the theories and things we talked about today. And again, if you have any cool mechanical tips, like the way to bypass the inertia of sprinting, then please let me know in the comments, and we can include it in the series. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.